Good. My name is Ann Wheeler. I'm the president of the Committee of 100 for Prince William County. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's nice to see such a great turnout for such a interesting occasion. I want to start by thanking the Dar Al Noor Islamic Community Center for having us this evening. And with that, I will introduce Hassan Islam, the president of the mosque, who will arrange for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening. I just want to thank everyone for coming to this place. I know every one of you has been indoor, taking off your shoes. That was a test for no holes in the sock. No, really, the reason we had to take off our shoes because we pray, we put our forehead here. So I really appreciate your understanding and consideration. With that, thank you again for choosing this place. Thank you. And we're going to participate in Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Scouts, prepare for the flag ceremony.
Scouts, advance! Color guard, post the colors. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The born and the unborn. Scouts dismissed.
You may all be seated.
Thank you, and thank the Boys and Girl Scouts for doing and leading the pledge for us. I want to start off by saying I just want to introduce a couple of elected officials who are here this evening. We have 3 elected officials from the Prince William County Board of County Supervisors. We have Peter Canlin. We have Maureen Cadigan. And I believe I also saw Marty Noe come in. Thank you. Also, just as a administrative thing, I was reminded if we could all silence our cell phones, and at least put them on silent so they don't go off in the middle of the event. We're all learning still remember to do that. And last, before I turn it over to Carol Novel, the president of the League of Women Voters in Prince William County, I just want to make a plug for joining the Prince William Committee of 100. We do have applications on the table back there. Our treasurer is here this evening somewhere, I believe John Harms. And we'd love to have you join us and get more involved in our Committee of 100. And we're all glad you're here tonight. With that, I will introduce Carol Novel. Thank you.
And we are very happy to make this a joint effort with the Committee 100 and the League of Women Voters. I don't think we've officially ever done that before, but we're very, very grateful that we had here and have our candidates here. And so what I would just like to do is give you just a real brief bio of folks that are here before I turn it over to the moderator. And we also have a table with lots of literature. Don't forget there's an election November this week. And there's lots of good information there, and encourage you to take that. And don't forget that there are 2 ballot questions on the ballot. Remember to read up on that before election day. I really need to stress that. Matt is here. It says his first job is being a great husband to his wonderful wife Megan, who is here, and a loving father to 3 amazing kids, Madeline, Sylvia, and Thomas. Currently serves on the Town Council in Bowling Green, Virginia, in the heart of Caroline County. He's a native Virginian, raised by 2 wonderful parents. His mother's a teacher assistant in the public school system, and his father is a land surveyor. He's a graduate of Hampton Sydney College and earned a post-baccalaureate certificate in Geographic Information Systems from Virginia Commonwealth University and works for Stafford County as a GIS analyst. So he says he works hard to improve the lives of the people in his community. And Congressman Wittman was elected to represent Virginia's 1st Congressional District in December 2007, currently serving in his 4th full term in the House of Representatives, and serves on the House Armed Services Committee and is chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee and the House Committee on Armed Resources. Since taking office, Rob's earned a reputation of being an advocate for our men and women in uniform and being a champion of the Chesapeake Bay. Prior to his election, Rob spent 26 years in state government as a public health specialist. He's also served as mayor of the town of Montrose, chairman of Westmoreland County Board of Supervisors, and a delegate to the 99th legislative district in the Virginia General Assembly. He holds a PhD in public policy and administration from Virginia Commonwealth University, a Master of Public Health degree in Health Policy and Administration from the University of North Carolina, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from Virginia Tech. He and his wife Catherine reside in Montrose and have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Thank you very much. And before I turn this over to Mark, a lot of you probably don't know where the 1st Congressional District is, or don't know the boundaries. So there are 2 maps in the back. At some point, you might want to look at one that shows where it is in Prince William County, and then the wide swath that it takes in Virginia. So I recommend you take a look at those. And our moderator is Mark Segraves, who has moderated for us previously. And you may be remember hearing him on the radio WTOP, where he was the host of Ask Governor for 10 years. And then he moved away from that job, so we don't hear much of him anymore. But he is a general assignment reporter for WRC-TV, an NBC affiliate in Washington, and he's the host of NewsPlus, public affairs program that's Sunday mornings on WCW50 TV. So Mark is going to take over and get this on the road.
All right, thanks, Carol, very much. Well, thanks for having me here this evening. I appreciate everybody coming out. First, I'd like everybody to thank our hosts here at the Islamic Center for having us here tonight. Let's see if as well as for the organizers, the Committee of 100 and the League of Women Voters. Let's give them a round of applause. This is a question I ask at every debate that I moderate, and I ask it of the audience. By a show of hands, how many people in the room right now are undecided as how they're going to vote in the election of this 1st congressional race here? There's a little bit of room for you guys. Well, I appreciate that. A lot of people make a big deal out of who wins the debate after debate. And my experience has always been that the same person wins every debate, and that is the voters. So you should congratulate yourselves for coming out, those of you who are not staff. So we have questions that were put together by a committee formed for both the Prince William Committee of 100 and the League of Women Voters, as well as some suggestions taken earlier this evening from the audience. I have them on these cards. Candidates have not seen these questions. We are giving them 2 minutes for opening statements, 2 minutes to answer questions, 1 minute for rebuttals, and then there will be closing statements that'll be 2 minutes as well. Earlier we decided by pick of hands who would go first. Congressman Wittman will go second on this. Rowe will go first. I do want to tell you that at 7:45 we are going to break for call to prayer. That'll be about a 20-minute break. You're welcome to mill about the room, use the restrooms, get a drink of water, chat with the candidates. We'll all be back in place at 8:05. We'll get started. We have a hard target of ending on time at 9 o'clock. So let's, with that in mind, Mr. Rowe, you were going to begin us with our opening statements. Here's our, for you two, here is our timekeeper right now. The most important guy in the room. He will tell you when you have 1 minute remaining, when you have 20 seconds remaining, and when it's time to stop. All right? Mr. Rowe, please.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I definitely want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Prince William 100 for putting this together. Big thanks also to the Dar al-Noor Islamic Center for hosting tonight. And Mark, thank you very much for moderating. I'm sure you'll keep us in check. So first, a little bit about me. I'm Matt Rowe. I'm the Democratic nominee for Congress here in the 1st District this year. Again, I want to give a shout out to my wife Megan, who's here in the front row, my lovely wife. Our 3 kids could not make it. We thought maybe that would probably not be a good thing to bring to the debate. So yeah, my kids are absolutely wonderful. 9-year-old, 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. 2 girls and a boy. My girls are in Girl Scouts, so I was very happy to see the Scouts come in and do the Pledge of Allegiance with us. For me here in the 1st District this year, my whole thing is I want to make day-to-day life better for folks here in the 1st District. So what does that mean? What am I trying to work for? I'm trying to bring normal governance back to Washington. No more government shutdowns, fights over the fiscal cliff, sequestration, arbitrary sequestration. I also want to make sure that we're investing enough in our transportation infrastructure, also recommitting to Veterans Affairs so that we can make sure that vets get the care that they have deserved and that they earn, and also fighting for paid family and maternity leave for working families. I get asked a lot, like, why did you jump into the race? And my quick answer is, I want to do the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people possible. And I think that's a good reason for anybody to get in. But there's a little bit more to it as well. I lost my dad to cancer last year. And that kind of reminded me that there's only so many chances in life that you can stand up and do the right thing. And there's never going to be a perfect time for that. The kids are too small or the job is a little bit too busy at work. So with that, I jumped in this year because I felt now was the time to stand up, to lend my voice and try to do the right thing for the people of the 1st District. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. We have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Well, thanks, Mark.
All right. There we go. Well, folks, thanks again. Thank you so much for everybody that put this evening's event on, for the Dar al Noor Islamic Center, for the League of Women Voters, for the entire community, for just all the effort that goes into this. I know it's extraordinarily tough to try to bring all these different groups together to make sure that those things happen. So I want to thank the Prince William Group of 100 for your efforts. Having the opportunity to exchange ideas is really what makes our country great. I live in the little town of Montrose, Virginia, population 380. I'm blessed, though, in that I get to travel back and forth from Montrose to Washington, D.C. to go to work each day. And it reminds me of what's important back home. I travel by people's houses that I've known all my life, and I can ask myself the question, could I knock on their door this evening and tell them what happened today? And what would they say? Would they say, Rob, good job? Or would they grab me by the ear and say, Rob, your dad taught you better than that? But it is really, I think, a time where Washington has to get things done. I am frustrated that things aren't getting done. I think there's changes to processes that we absolutely have to put in place where members of Congress are held accountable and have to sacrifice if they don't get the jobs done. I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to support our brave men and women in the military. They do an absolutely fantastic job, folks, under very tough conditions. We owe it to them to provide for them the necessary resources to make sure they're properly trained, equipped, and that we counter the forces of evil around the world that we know our armed forces there to protect us against. I want to make sure we're doing that, supporting our veterans. We need to do more there, and we also need to grow this economy. There's such untapped potential in our economy where if government would just get out of the way, reduce regulations, put in place a taxation system that actually encourages investment, encourages savings, encourages the right things to be done by folks, we can really unleash that untapped potential in this nation. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. Look forward to answering the questions and having the dialogue about what the future of this nation needs to be through our efforts in Congress.
Okay. That was our first one over time. So we're going to let that be the last. We're going to be easy on the first one. I'm going to ask everybody to hold their applause now until the end of the evening so that we can get through this. So here we are with our first question, and Mr. Wittman, you will answer first on this one. The majority of the 1st District is not in Prince William County in Northern Virginia, as those of you who studied the map that Carol will be testing you on later this evening, and you're both very familiar with the districts. What priorities for the balance of the 1st District are compatible with the Prince William area? Sure.
Well, obviously, the elements of economic development, and the entire state of Virginia is struggling with unemployment, struggling with small business growth, to make sure we're doing things to help. Another thing that's an issue across the state is transportation. I think there are things that we can do to help encourage transportation infrastructure growth, or do that in the right ways, though, that coincide with what counties have planned. You know, in the years past, we've had a transportation plan that goes in one direction, and county land use decisions that sometimes don't reflect what needs to be happening there at the state level. So I want to make sure the state is doing those things. We did pass a transportation funding bill to make sure dollars are coming to the state for those improvements on places like 95 and 66. Those things absolutely have to happen. Another thing, too, is that we have a great military presence across the 1st District. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support our brave men and women in the military, and to make sure that we are getting the necessary funding to them in the ways that allow them to do the job that they absolutely need to do, and we ask them to do. We ask them to go into some really dangerous places around the world. I want to make sure that we're there supporting them and giving them the tools that they need to succeed. If we look, too, about what needs to happen, is government needs to get out of the way. As I talk to businesses across the district, the biggest thing I hear from small businesses is the amount of regulation that they have to deal with. Folks, it's pretty simple. The cost of regulation, just U.S. regulation today on businesses, is $1.9 trillion annually. Our gross domestic product is $19 trillion. That's 10% of our gross domestic product goes to complying with regulations. And I'm not saying no to any regulations, but I think by any measure we have over-regulated. Let's get back to a reasonable realm and look at what we can free up just with that and what companies have to pay. And remember, those efforts do not add to the bottom line for those companies when they have to comply.
Oh, he has his timer on now. You're going to hear it. Mr. Rowe, 2 minutes.
I'll stand up too so everybody can see me, okay. Anyway, first off, I would definitely say that transportation has got to be one of the #1 issues throughout the district, especially up in Prince William County. I mean, for those of you that have worked up north today, up in Washington or up in Reston or anywhere like that, hello? Okay. You had to come back here. Hopefully you would get here on time. Some people weren't able to make it. We understand that. And the big thing is making sure that we do have the transportation infrastructure in place, and we're putting the investments in place now, not just to get back up to where we need to be at this point, but making investments for the future, especially in transportation. The traffic nightmare that so many people have to deal with is really just too much. That's time away from your family. That's time away from spending money in your own community to be able to be a part of your community and to spend locally. That's a big problem there. If you go throughout the rest of the 1st District, you're talking about dilapidated bridges, rural roads that definitely are in need of repair. I mean, this is definitely a nationwide issue and a district-wide issue as well. One of the big things that we need to work on is also making sure that we have enough money in our highway trust fund. That money has actually been running out lately, and the highway trust fund is funded by gasoline tax. The issue that we have here is that people are a little bit more, they're consuming less gas because cars are more efficient, and because of that, we're running out of money in the highway trust fund. This is a very critical component here to making sure that we have the money in place to put into our roads and bridges nationally. Again, also in the 1st District, we were talking about the economy and business. We want to make sure that small businesses, which make up 70% of all employment in this country, we want to make sure that we are supporting initiatives that drive access to capital that they need in order to grow. And with that, they can go ahead and have that economic certainty to be ready to be big players in the district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me use up the rebuttal minute to ask you each, and we'll give you each a minute on this. Today, your Governor McCall, along with Governor Hogan of Maryland and Mayor Bowser of the district, were briefed by Metro officials about the dire financial straits of Metro. And 2 things came up. One, a regional sales tax to help fund Metro, and also dedicated funding from the federal government. Right now, the federal government pays 0 for operating costs for Metro. As a member of Congress, you'll get to weigh in on the federal funding side of that equation. We'll start with you, Congressman Wittman. We'll give you each 1 minute. Do you support a dedicated federal funding stream for Metro's operating expenses beyond what the federal government is providing right now?
Mark, I think you have to put things in priority. As we've seen through the years, Metro has been disastrously managed. I want to make sure we get back to actually managing Metro the proper way, making sure where the dollars are going, where they need to go for modernization. What are we doing to make sure that we have ridership where it needs to be?
How do we make sure that it is a functioning entity from a standpoint of financial management? Before you talk about any resources, I think you have to make sure that you get the fundamental elements about how it's been operated through the years. This maintenance has been put off for years. It costs much more to do maintenance when it gets to this disastrous point than it did to do that along the way. We also know, too, in how decisions have been made, I want to make sure that every entity has a seat at the table in decision making to make sure that we get Metro functioning properly first before we have any conversation about resources.
Mr. Rowe, Metro Fund?
I absolutely support federal funding for the Metro, increased funding for the Metro. Here's the deal. So if you look back at, recently we had that day where the Metro had to take a day off so that they could go ahead and do all their repairs. That is an absolute failure of Metro. We need to have major accountability at WMATA to make sure that we don't have situations like this again. But the thing is, we can't put on the backs of the district and the state of Maryland and the Commonwealth of Virginia to fund Metro. I mean, the problem that you have here is that Metro is serving the national capital, and that is something that you need to recognize as a national priority. It's almost a national security priority because you want to make sure that people can flow in and out of the capital with ease and with some amount of quickness. The thing is, we need to have federal investment into WMATA so that we can do these changes that we need to have. This includes Metro expansion. This includes the major repairs that need to be done. I mean, look at every time that an escalator is broken, that's every day at every station, right? Exactly. So we need to go ahead and do that. And these safety issues that we have, it's unconscionable that we keep having these.
Thank you. Our second question, gentlemen. What steps can you suggest to improve the national economy and enhance career opportunities for the next generation, inclusive of all income levels? Ms. Rowe, we'll start with you. 2 minutes. Thank you.
Let's talk about where we are with public education. Let's talk about our high schoolers. Path to success. We always hear that term kind of bounded about, and what does that really mean? We have failed if we have a high school graduate that steps off that stage with their diploma and they have no idea what to do next. So the thing is, we need to make sure that we are providing high school graduates with different paths to success. And it doesn't always just mean going to college. For some people it does. So we want to make sure that college prep is a big part of this. But also vocational education. Make sure that we are creating these new jobs that need to be filled. I mean, anyone that's ever done tried to do any sort of work on their house, you call up a roofer or a plumber, and sometimes you have to call 7 or 8 different places, and then you can finally find somebody that's able to come out 2 months from now. That's because we have a shortage of people working in these vocations. Let's go ahead and prioritize vocational education in our public schools. So between that, college prep, vocational education, and path to the military. If military service is in the cards for some students, let's go ahead and let them know about that too. There are many different paths to success, and we need to go ahead and make sure that every student can find that path and help them out.
Congressman?
Workforce development is more than just talking about the structure of that. It's what do we do to make sure we put those elements into action. And my wife's a school teacher. She's been teaching for 37 years. I hear about it every day about what needs to happen in our school system. And we need to really empower teachers, whereas we have not in the past. It's great to have standardized tests to measure, but I want to make sure standardized tests actually represent how we're preparing students for success after school. And it means more than just coming up with changes in curriculum. It means how do we engage the business community? They're the ones that are creating the jobs of the future. How do we get them to commit to say, if these schools produce graduates with these skills in the career and technical education areas, will these businesses have jobs for them so those individuals can stay in the community? I want to make sure we have a better association between the business community and the education system. I want to make sure, too, that there's a commitment there so that when those students graduate, businesses tell the schools this is what we need with the knowledge, skills, and abilities that these students come to the workplace with. If you look today, there's a complete imbalance. 46% of college graduates today are not working in the area in which they received their degree. Many of them have massive amounts of student debt with no job to go to. That is a disservice to them, and it creates a burden for them for years and years to come. 60% of the new jobs in the future will be in those areas that require a credential or a certification, those areas of career and technical education. That's where we need to be focusing. Those are good paying jobs. Over a lifetime, those students can actually make more in many of the fields in which they could receive a college degree. We absolutely have to make that happen. The state of Virginia has taken the first step with changing the curriculum in high school starting in 2018. So the last 2 years are actually either career or technical education or college track. In Congress, we just passed the Carl D. Perkins Reauthorization Act, which provides for additional dollars for career and technical education. That's where we need to place our focus.
Thank you. Our next question. What reforms would you make to entitlement spending or tax policy to reduce the federal deficit? Congressman, you go first.
Well, tax policy is pretty easy. I think you have to make sure that you redesign the tax policy to make it simpler, to make it more fair, to make it more equitable, to encourage the proper behaviors, whether it's with individuals or businesses. I want to make sure businesses actually are encouraged to create jobs, not a system that encourages them to send jobs overseas. We have a tax called the repatriation tax. It says if those businesses bring money back to the United States, they have to pay the difference between the tax rate in that foreign country and the tax rate here. That's why Apple Computer, the largest company in the world, the vast majority of their operations are in Apple, Ireland, where, by the way, the corporate tax rate is 13%. We have got to adjust those systems, make sure, too, we do away with many of the confusing parts of the tax code, the individual deductions and loopholes that provide for this disparate tax system. I want to make sure, too, that we're encouraging individuals to save, to invest, to make sure we keep those dollars here, we get them to the right places. Right now we have a system that's over 70,000 pages of tax code. It is all about avoidance behavior instead of people putting their resources in the right place. Think about the millions of dollars spent each year, billions of dollars, and what people do to hire accountants to navigate the tax code. Let's make this fairer and more equitable and make sure, too, that it is leading to economic growth. I believe firmly that we can do that. Those two things go hand in hand. Economic growth, a modernized tax code. I have a bill in that says let's take the current tax code, let's put it in the trash can. I think we can do better. Let's take a blank sheet of paper out and create a new tax system that actually is fair and equitable and reflects the modern economy that we have now. We know that the tax code from the past reflects what has happened in those times, an agrarian economy. Today we have a new economy. We have to modernize that system if we're to hope to make sure it encourages and gets business owners and individuals to exhibit the right behaviors to actually get our economy going.
Mr. Rowe.
I'll first talk about the entitlement and spending portion of that. So when it comes to Social Security, there's actually a cap on how much you pay into Social Security. And if you hit that cap, you can keep going up in income and you're still paying the same as when you hit that cap. Right now, because of that cap, only about 83% of all income is being taxed, and that portion is being put into the Social Security Trust Fund. It used to be about 90%. The thing about that is because wages are higher at this point. I'm for trying to get back to that 90% rate so that we can have enough money to keep Social Security solvent. In terms of taxation, I'm for the current progressive tax plan that we have right now, where people at the lower end of the economic spectrum, they pay a lower percentage, and as you move up, you pay a higher percentage. Now, one of the things I'm not for is any sort of national flat tax scheme. This is actually sort of similar to what my opponent is actually advocating for. It's something called the fair tax, and what that does is it eliminates the IRS. So if you work for the IRS, I'm sorry, it eliminates the IRS and actually institutes a 23% national sales tax on everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Food, clothes, medical bills, rent, the purchase of a new home. And it's a little bit more than a 23% sales tax. Like 23% sales tax, you think, oh, something costs $1, now it's $1.23. That's not the case. It's 23% inclusive. So that means if the vendor sold something for $1, the vendor keeps 77 cents and 23 cents goes to the government. If you want to make sure that the vendor still recoups that $1, you have to actually raise the price up to $1.30 for everything. So it's almost like adding 30% to all the prices of everything ever. That's something that I'm not for. Listen, the tax system is complicated, and it's for a reason. We want to make sure that it's fair and equitable to everyone. Simply scrapping it for me is just not the way to go.
Congressman, you want to get back in on this tax scheme?
I do. I want to give a little definition to the fair tax. The fair tax is actually a very thoughtful process. You only tell part of the story. It is indeed a national sales tax, but what goes away is your income tax, your Medicare premium, your Social Security premium, capital gains tax, the estate tax. Every element of federal tax goes away. So if you actually look at it, and for those people in the lower income brackets, less than $30,000 a year, They pay zero. They get those dollars back. So it actually is a very fair tax, as it is called. I think it's a way to go ahead and really get things back on track. It's simpler. I don't know of anybody that's going to shed a tear about the IRS going away. I believe that would be a lot better for our nation. Simpler, fairer, more thoughtful. Having a more complex tax code is not the way to encourage growth or encourage ways to make sure that people are indeed making the right decisions to be able to grow our economy. So I would say bigger government's not better government. Simpler tax code is better. Making sure, too, that people get to keep more of what they earn. That, to me, is better.
1 minute.
Eliminating the IRS is a good soundbite, but it's not good policy. And the thing is, economists have looked at the fair tax plan and said that for the bottom 90% of income earners, you actually are going to be paying more tax as a result of fair tax. And if you're in the top 1%, you're actually going to be saving $75,000 per year on average thanks to the fair tax. So no, it's a giveaway to top earners, and it's a burden on people at the lower end.
Let me do a follow-up question, give you each 1 minute. We'll start with you, Congressman. A lot of us have probably learned for the first time about some of the depreciation that billionaires are allowed to take on their taxes from Donald Trump's tax forms. And he has said himself that this is something that Congress could easily close this loophole that allows him and other billionaires to depreciate millions and millions of dollars and then write it off on their taxes going forward for years. To each of you, would you commit to closing that loophole, Congressman?
I think there are ways that you can close those loopholes. If you do that, you better make sure that you adjust the tax rates to make sure that, again, our system is fair and more equitable. I would encourage folks to go to abetterway.gop. It lays out what I think is a fantastic tax plan that reforms the current system, makes it simpler, fairer, looks at all the deductions and loopholes, keeps those that are critical, those donations to charitable organizations, the mortgage interest tax deduction, but also looks at marginal rates, brings those down to, again, make sure that we are lessening the burden on folks and making sure we have a fairer, simpler, and more equitable tax system. I think that's the way to go. I do believe that the system we have today is too complex. Being able to simplify that, I think, makes sense. But only in looking at where the marginal tax rates are. You can't do one without the other, because if you do away with those deductions without adjusting the marginal tax rates, you actually increase taxes. You make it less equitable and less fair.
Mr. Rowe.
I think you have to be careful with that, because if anybody that's ever started a business, they can tell you that you fail a few times before you succeed. So you don't want to burden them with accepting all the losses for any sort of failed venture. You want to make sure that you don't stifle entrepreneurship and tell them, like, okay, you're just stuck with all the losses forever. So I'd be very careful about making any sort of changes to that. Yeah, Donald Trump was able to take advantage of the tax code, and it was completely in a fair and legal way. Even though he lost $1 billion that year, and he was able to kind of keep pushing that forward and not having to pay federal income tax for some amount of years after that. I don't know how many years that's been. He hasn't released his tax returns, but I would be very careful about making that change with that, because again, you want to make sure that people don't get trapped in that situation where, okay, I failed once at business, I can never try again.
Our next question now. Should the United States offer a path to citizenship for those who have not committed crimes after entering the United States illegally or after overstaying their visa? Can you explain what you believe is the best and worst of our immigration laws? And we begin 2 minutes for you, Mr. Rowe.
I support comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, this has been an idea that's been bounded about now for the better part of a decade. President Bush was actually one of the biggest supporters of this when he was in office. It's something that I absolutely support. So nothing that I support is any different from what we've been talking about for a long time. A pathway to citizenship, make sure that you get people in line, you're helping them out along the way, so you have that path ready for them. You want to make sure that everybody's paying their taxes. You want to make sure that their kids are getting the education that they need. We want to make sure that you're working on providing English language education to everyone so that they can join our society and participate in our economy. Right now, our biggest flaws with the immigration system is that it doesn't take into account sort of the complexities of life, as it were, okay? There are people that have come here from overseas for whatever reason. It's usually just for a better life, to escape wherever they're trying to escape and to live the American life. You can't create a system that says, okay, you're going to have to go home and then pay a big fine to come back in. Whether or not you believe that's right the problem with that is that it's not practical. You're not going to be able to convince people to do that, and they're going to continue to live under the radar and always sort of be like second-class members of our society. That's the problem that I have with the current immigration system, is that we desperately need this reform so that we can finally provide this pathway to citizenship for people. And the last the last little thing, I'm definitely also in favor of the DREAM Act. I mean, if you're born here in America and your parents were not, I think you should be able to stay. But the last thing I want to do is to break up families.
Congressman.
Thank you. If you look at this issue, it really has to be tackled in stages. You look today, people have completely lost faith in our immigration system. And the reason is because there's no security along our borders. That is a homeland security issue. It is something, too, about fairness and equity, to make sure that we are looking at how do we make sure that our system is fair and equitable and thoughtful. First thing we have to do is to make sure we secure our borders, first and foremost. When we do that, and you won't get leakage across the border down to zero, but you can get awful close, then I think you can begin to have the discussion about how do we address the situation with folks that are here. 40% of illegal immigrants that are here today are here on overstayed visas. I know when I travel to another country, when I go there, I give specific information on that visa form, and it says on the form, if you do not leave the country at this time, in other words, you do not check out, we will come and find you, and you will be incarcerated. I think we have to make sure we're enforcing our visa programs here to make sure the folks that are overstaying the visas, that we enforce that. That to me is key. Looking at the other folks that are here, I do believe that there are reasonable and thoughtful ways that you can address those people that, by the way, did not follow the law in coming here, but that have behaved and have been paying taxes in a way that we can have a thoughtful and reasonable way for them to continue to stay in the country, but not as a citizen, because they have, again, not followed the law. I want to make sure that we allow them to be legal, but they shouldn't be allowed to have their voting rights, because, again, they haven't restored or they haven't pursued things properly under the law. And I also believe, too, that because they have violated the law, there has to be a consequence with that. And that's what I believe that you can do in stages. Address border security, address the visa program, the overstayed visas, and then for the other folks that are here, look at a way to be able to bring them back in legal status, but make sure too it reflects them not following the law.
That's time. We have 2 minutes until Paul's prepared. Did you want to get a rebuttal?
Just have 1 minute.
We have 1 minute, so you get 30 seconds.
I'll be brief. The wall's not going to work, and it's going to cost too much money, and people are still going to be able to get around it. The thing that's important to me is to make sure that we don't have a whole layer of second-class people in our society. If you don't give people the pathway to citizenship, it's going to be this self-perpetuating nightmare of people not being able to join our society and be active members of it. Yes, that means working towards a path to citizenship for everyone that's been here. Anyone that has not committed a crime, I want to make sure that they have that pathway. And we're probably right there at 30 seconds, so I'll end it.
Congressman, if you can make it fast.
Yes. First of all, we do have to secure our borders. We are a sovereign nation. Without secure borders, we cannot provide the structure and order that we need here. So we have to do that. You can do it with a combination of physical barriers. We have technology today that can do that, as well as making sure you have people on the border. Doing those things, we can indeed secure our nation's borders, which is, I think, critical to our sovereignty. Look at every other nation around the world. They have pretty secure borders, and they have a structure to their immigration programs to make sure folks that are coming in for a purpose and that they're meeting a need for that nation. We can do that.
Thank you. As we said